Hello, and welcome to Sleepy Philosophy, where we gently explore life's biggest questions in the softest possible way. Tonight, we're embarking on a quiet journey into one of philosophy's most persistent puzzles, one that has kept thinkers awake for centuries while hopefully helping you drift peacefully towards sleep. We're asking a question that might sound simple, but opens into depths as vast as the ocean itself. Do you actually have free will? Now, I do hope this exploration isn't so fascinating that it keeps you wide awake, but if it does, at least you'll drift off with some profound ideas to ponder. This is a question that touches every moment of your existence. Every choice you make, from the decision to listen to this video right now, to what you'll have for breakfast tomorrow, assuming you have any say in the matter at all. Before we begin our gentle descent into this philosophical mystery, if you find these quiet explorations helpful for sleep, or simply for settling your thoughts, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to Sleepy Philosophy. It helps other restless minds find their way here, so settle in. Perhaps you're already tucked beneath your covers, or maybe you're lying on the sofa as the day winds down. Take a slow, deep breath. The question we're exploring tonight isn't just academic, it's deeply personal. Every decision you've ever made, every path you've chosen, every moment of doubt or certainty in your life hinges on this ancient puzzle. Imagine for a moment that you're standing in a coffee shop faced with a simple choice between tea and coffee. It feels obvious that you're the one making this decision, doesn't it? You weigh your options, consider your mood, maybe think about how much caffeine you've already had, and then you choose. The choice feels entirely yours, born from your preferences, your reasoning, your will acting freely upon the world. But what if I told you that some of the brightest minds in history have argued that this feeling, this sense of choosing, might be nothing more than an elaborate illusion, that your choice was actually determined long before you walked into that coffee shop, perhaps even before you were born? That the universe, like a vast clockwork mechanism, had already decided whether you'd order tea or coffee based on the precise arrangement of atoms in your brain, the chemical reactions cascading through your neurons, and the long chain of cause and effect stretching back to the beginning of time itself. This isn't science fiction or philosophical fantasy. This is the heart of one of philosophy's most enduring debates, a question that has profound implications for how we think about responsibility, morality, punishment, praise, love, and the very meaning of human existence. If we don't have free will, are we responsible for our actions? Can we take credit for our achievements, or blame for our failures? Are we anything more than sophisticated biological machines following the dictates of physics and chemistry? The question of free will sits at the intersection of philosophy, neuroscience, physics, and psychology. It's where ancient wisdom meets cutting-edge brain research, where abstract reasoning encounters the concrete reality of neural networks firing in your head right now. As you listen to these words, electrochemical signals are racing through your brain at incredible speeds, creating the experience of understanding, the sensation of curiosity, maybe even the feeling that you're choosing to continue listening. But let's step back for a moment and consider what we even mean when we talk about free will. The concept itself is more slippery than it might first appear. When philosophers speak of free will, they're generally referring to the idea that you could have acted differently than you did. That when you chose coffee over tea, there was a genuine possibility, a real alternative, where you might have chosen tea instead. It's the notion that your choices aren't simply the inevitable result of prior causes, but emerge from something deeper, something uniquely you. This might seem obvious, even trivial. Of course you could have chosen differently. You felt the weight of the decision, you considered your options, you deliberated. But here's where things get interesting, and perhaps a little unsettling. What if that sense of deliberation, that feeling of weighing options, is itself just another link in the causal chain? What if your brain, following the laws of physics as surely as a falling stone follows gravity, was always going to produce the experience of choice, while never actually offering you any real alternatives? The stakes of this question couldn't be higher. Our entire legal system rests on the assumption that people can choose to follow or break the law. Our concepts of praise and blame, of moral responsibility, of justice itself, all depend on the idea that individuals are the ultimate authors of their actions. If free will is an illusion, if we're all just biological robots following our programming, then what happens to human dignity? What happens to meaning itself? Yet perhaps we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's begin where any good philosophical investigation should begin, with careful definitions and a gentle examination of what we think we know. The debate over free will isn't new, it's ancient. Philosophers have been grappling with this question for over 2,000 years, and their insights can help us navigate these deep waters with wisdom and clarity. There are, broadly speaking, three main positions in this debate, each with its own compelling arguments and troubling implications. First, there are the hard determinists, who argue that free will is indeed an illusion. Everything that happens, including every human choice and action, is the inevitable result of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of time. We feel free, but that feeling is just another determined event in the causal chain. Then there are the libertarians, not to be confused with the political philosophy, who insist that free will is real and that determinism must be false, at least when it comes to human actions. They argue that we genuinely do have the power to shape our futures, to act as ultimate originators of our choices, even if we can't fully explain how this works. Finally, there are the compatibilists, perhaps the most philosophically sophisticated group, who argue that free will and determinism can coexist. They claim that the problem lies not in the nature of reality, but in how we define free will. If we understand freedom correctly, they say, we can have meaningful choice even in a determined world. Each of these positions offers profound insights, and each faces serious challenges. The hard determinists seem to align with our best scientific understanding of the world, but they struggle to account for our deep sense of responsibility and meaning. The libertarians honour our experience of genuine choice, but they have difficulty explaining how free will could actually work in a world governed by natural laws. The compatibilists offer an elegant solution, but critics argue they're simply redefining the problem rather than solving it. As we explore these different perspectives tonight, remember that this isn't just an abstract intellectual exercise. The question of free will touches the very core of who you are and how you understand your place in the universe. It affects how you think about your past decisions, how you approach future choices, and how you relate to other people. It's a question that deserves our most careful and gentle consideration. The journey we're taking tonight will lead us through some of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience, where researchers have found ways to predict some of your decisions before you're consciously aware of making them. We'll explore the implications of quantum mechanics, where the fundamental randomness of subatomic particles might offer a loophole in the deterministic clockwork of the universe. We'll consider the wisdom of ancient philosophers and the insights of modern thinkers, all wrestling with this eternal question. But for now, as we begin this exploration, let's simply sit with the mystery itself. You're here, listening to these words, following this train of thought. Did you choose to be here, or were you always going to end up in this moment, guided by forces beyond your control? As you consider this question, notice the quality of your own experience. Do you feel free? Does it seem like you could choose to stop listening, to think about something else, to let your mind wander? Or does even that choice feel somehow inevitable, the natural result of your curiosity, your tiredness, your particular history and circumstances? The beauty of this question is that it invites us to become observers of our own minds, to notice the subtle mechanics of thought and decision that usually operate below the threshold of awareness. As we continue our gentle exploration tonight, pay attention to your own experience of choosing, of willing, of being the author of your own mental activity. This self-observation will be one of our most valuable tools as we navigate the deep waters of free will. The ancient Greeks, those remarkable thinkers who gave us democracy and geometry, also gave us some of our earliest insights into this puzzle. They understood something profound about human nature, something we're still grappling with today. The Stoics, in particular, developed a sophisticated understanding of what it means to be free in a world that seems to operate according to fixed laws. Epictetus, himself a former slave who knew intimately what it meant to lack external freedom, taught that true freedom comes not from controlling what happens to us, but from controlling our responses to what happens. He divided all of existence into two categories: things that are up to us and things that are not up to us. External events, other people's actions, even our own bodies and their limitations, these fall into the second category. But our judgments, our attitudes, our responses, these remain within our control. This might seem like a consolation prize at first glance. If we can't control the world around us, at least we can control our inner world. But the Stoics saw something deeper here. They recognized that this internal freedom, this capacity to choose our responses, might be the only freedom that truly matters. When you stub your toe on the coffee table, you cannot choose whether it hurts, but you can choose whether to curse the furniture or laugh at your own clumsiness. Yet even this seemingly modest claim raises profound questions. When you choose to laugh rather than curse, what exactly is doing the choosing? Is there some essential you, some core self that stands apart from your brain chemistry, your past experiences, your genetic predispositions? Or is the choice itself simply the result of countless prior causes, your personality shaped by genetics and environment in ways that make laughter inevitable in that moment? Modern neuroscience has given us tools to probe these questions in ways the ancient Greeks could never have imagined. In the 1980s, a researcher named Benjamin Libet conducted a series of experiments that sent shockwaves through philosophy and neuroscience alike. Libet asked participants to perform a simple action, like flexing their wrist whenever they felt the urge to do so. While they performed this task, he monitored their brain activity using sensitive electrodes. What Libet discovered was startling. The brain showed a characteristic pattern of activity, called the readiness potential, that began several hundred milliseconds before participants reported being aware of their intention to move. In other words, the brain seemed to begin preparing for action before the conscious mind decided to act. It was as if the brain had made the decision, and then, a fraction of a second later, informed consciousness of what it had already chosen to do. The implications were profound and troubling. If our brains are preparing for action before we're consciously aware of deciding to act, what role does consciousness play in decision-making? Are we the authors of our actions, or are we simply witnesses to decisions that have already been made by unconscious neural processes? Libet himself was troubled by these findings, and tried to preserve some role for conscious will by suggesting that consciousness might have the power to veto actions that the unconscious brain initiates. We might not be able to consciously start our actions, but perhaps we can consciously stop them. This veto power became known as free won't, and it offered a kind of compromise position. Maybe we don't have the sweeping freedom to initiate any action we choose, but we retain the crucial ability to refuse actions that our brains propose. When you feel the urge to say something cruel in an argument, perhaps it's your conscious will that steps in and stops you from speaking those words aloud. But even this modest rescue attempt faces challenges. Later experiments suggested that the veto itself might be subject to the same unconscious preparation as the original action. The decision not to act might be just as determined as the decision to act. The brain's activity patterns seem to unfold according to their own logic, with consciousness arriving on the scene like a narrator who believes they're directing a story that has already been written. These findings might seem to support the hard determinist position, the view that free will is indeed an illusion. If our brains are making decisions before we're consciously aware of them, if our sense of choosing is just a post hoc story we tell ourselves about events that have already been determined, then perhaps we really are biological machines following the dictates of neural circuitry and brain chemistry. Yet the picture is more complex than these early experiments suggested. Recent research has revealed that the readiness potential Libet observed might not represent a decision at all, but rather a general state of preparation that the brain enters when it's ready to act. It's like the way a car's engine idles, ready to move but not yet committed to any particular direction. The actual decision might emerge from more subtle neural processes that current technology can't easily detect. Moreover, Libet's experiments involved arbitrary actions, like flexing your wrist whenever you feel like it. These movements have no consequences, no moral weight, no connection to your deeper values or long-term goals. It's unclear whether the same patterns would hold for the kinds of decisions that feel most important to us, the choices that seem to reflect our deepest commitments and values. When you decide to forgive someone who has hurt you, when you choose to pursue a career that feels meaningful rather than one that pays more, when you decide to tell the truth even when a lie would be easier, are these decisions also preceded by unconscious neural activity that determines the outcome? Or do these more complex, value-laden choices involve different brain processes that might leave more room for conscious influence? The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the role of time in human decision-making. Unlike Libet's split-second choices, many of our most important decisions unfold over days, weeks, or even years. You might spend months deliberating about whether to move to a new city, weighing countless factors, imagining different futures, seeking advice from friends and family. During this extended process of deliberation, your brain is certainly active, processing information, forming and reforming neural connections, gradually shifting the balance of considerations that will ultimately determine your choice. But this extended timeline might actually make the question of free will more complex, not simpler. If your decision emerges gradually from a complex interplay of conscious reasoning, unconscious processing, emotional responses, social influences, and random fluctuations in brain chemistry, then at what point does the decision actually get made? When you finally announce your choice to move, are you discovering a decision that your brain has already reached? Or are you actively creating that decision through the very act of choosing? Perhaps the dichotomy between free will and determinism is too simple to capture the rich complexity of human decision-making. Your brain is not a simple machine following a predetermined program, but a dynamic, adaptive system constantly responding to new information and changing circumstances. Each thought influences the next. Each decision shapes future decisions. Each experience leaves traces that alter the neural landscape in subtle but permanent ways. In this view, you're neither completely free nor completely determined, but something more interesting, a complex system capable of genuine novelty and creativity, constrained by your history and biology, but not entirely enslaved by them. Your choices emerge from the intricate dance between your conscious deliberation and unconscious processing, between your reasoned analysis and emotional intuition, between your individual psychology and social context. This perspective suggests that the question of free will might be less about whether you have ultimate control over your actions, and more about how you participate in the ongoing creation of yourself. Each choice you make, whether freely willed or determined, becomes part of the history that shapes your future choices. You are both the author and the character in your own story, writing yourself into existence one decision at a time. As you lie there now, perhaps feeling your thoughts beginning to slow and scatter as sleep approaches, consider this gentle paradox. Even if your decision to close your eyes and rest is determined by factors beyond your control, your fatigue, your circadian rhythms, the soothing rhythm of these words, it remains your decision in the most meaningful sense. It emerges from the unique constellation of experiences, values, and circumstances that make you who you are. The ancient question of free will continues to evolve as our understanding of the brain deepens and our tools for studying consciousness become more sophisticated. But perhaps the most important insight isn't whether we have free will in some ultimate metaphysical sense, but how believing in our capacity for choice shapes the way we live our lives and treat one another. The question of whether our beliefs about free will matter might seem abstract, but research suggests these beliefs have profound effects on how we behave. Studies have shown that when people are exposed to arguments against free will, even briefly, they become more likely to cheat, less likely to help others, and more prone to aggressive behavior. It's as if the mere suggestion that our choices don't matter becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, undermining the very moral responsibility that makes society function. Conversely, people who believe strongly in free will tend to show greater self-control, more ethical behavior, and a stronger sense of personal responsibility. They're more likely to persist in the face of challenges, more willing to accept accountability for their mistakes, and more generous in their treatment of others. Whether or not free will exists in some ultimate sense, believing in it seems to make us better people. This creates a fascinating paradox that philosophers call the pragmatic problem of free will. Even if rigorous scientific investigation suggests that free will is an illusion, perhaps we need this illusion to function as moral beings. Maybe the truth, if it is that we lack genuine freedom, is too corrosive to human flourishing to be fully embraced. Some thinkers argue that this gives us reason to maintain belief in free will regardless of what neuroscience might tell us about the mechanics of decision-making. But this pragmatic approach sits uneasily with our commitment to truth and intellectual honesty. Should we really base our beliefs on their usefulness rather than their accuracy? And if we do choose to believe in free will for pragmatic reasons, doesn't that very choice suggest that we possess the freedom we're trying to justify believing in? Let's take a different approach and consider what quantum mechanics might contribute to this ancient debate. In the early 20th century, physicists discovered that at the most fundamental level, reality appears to be genuinely random. When a radioactive atom decays, when a photon passes through a barrier, when an electron jumps to a different orbital, these events seem to happen without any determining cause. They're not just unpredictable due to our ignorance. They appear to be genuinely indeterminate. Some philosophers and scientists have seized on this quantum indeterminacy as a possible source of free will. If the universe is not completely deterministic at the quantum level, perhaps this creates space for genuine choice to emerge. Maybe consciousness somehow harnesses quantum randomness to generate truly free decisions that aren't simply the inevitable result of prior causes. The idea is seductive, but it faces serious challenges. Random events are not the same as free events. If your decisions are based on quantum coin flips happening in your neurons, are they really any more free than if they were based on classical deterministic processes? A choice that emerges from pure randomness seems no more attributable to you as an agent than one that emerges from rigid causation. In either case, you're not the ultimate source of your actions. Moreover, the brain appears to be too warm and noisy an environment for quantum effects to play a significant role in neural computation. The delicate quantum states that exhibit true indeterminacy are quickly destroyed by the thermal chaos of biological systems. While quantum mechanics might govern the behavior of individual particles in your neurons, by the time these effects aggregate into the large-scale patterns of neural activity that correlate with consciousness, any quantum randomness has likely been washed out. Yet some researchers continue to explore quantum theories of consciousness, suggesting that the brain might have evolved ways to preserve and amplify quantum effects. Perhaps certain cellular structures create isolated environments where quantum coherence can persist long enough to influence neural processing. These ideas remain highly speculative, but they remind us that our understanding of consciousness and its relationship to physical processes is still deeply incomplete. The relationship between consciousness and free will deserves careful consideration. We tend to assume that if we have free will, it must be connected to our conscious awareness. After all, the decisions that feel most free are those where we're consciously deliberating, weighing options, and making reasoned choices. But consciousness might be less central to free will than we typically assume. Much of your behavior unfolds without conscious oversight. You navigate crowded sidewalks, maintain conversations, and perform complex skills like driving or playing music with minimal conscious attention. Your brain is constantly making decisions about where to direct your eyes, how to balance your body, when to breathe more deeply, all without consulting your conscious awareness. These unconscious processes are incredibly sophisticated, processing vast amounts of information and coordinating complex responses with remarkable efficiency. If free will exists, it might operate primarily at this unconscious level, with consciousness serving more as a monitoring and reporting system than as the executive center of decision-making. Your conscious experience of choosing might be less like a CEO making decisions, and more like a spokesperson announcing decisions that have already been made through complex unconscious processes. This possibility challenges our intuitive understanding of agency, but doesn't necessarily eliminate free will altogether. Perhaps the question isn't whether your conscious mind has ultimate control over your actions, but whether the broader system that constitutes you, including both conscious and unconscious processes, has the capacity for genuine choice and self-determination. Consider the experience of creativity. When artists, writers, or scientists describe their most profound insights, they often speak of ideas arriving unbidden, emerging from somewhere beyond conscious control. The mathematician Henri Poincaré famously described how the solution to a complex problem suddenly appeared to him as he was stepping onto a bus after his conscious mind had given up on the puzzle. Was this insight freely chosen, or was it simply the inevitable result of unconscious mental processes working through the problem? Perhaps this question misses the point. The insight was genuinely Poincaré's, emerging from his unique knowledge, experience, and mental architecture, even if he couldn't consciously direct its arrival. It represented a form of authorship that doesn't require conscious control at every step. In the same way, your decisions might be authentically yours, even if they emerge from processes that operate below the threshold of awareness. The development of artificial intelligence adds another layer to these questions. As machines become increasingly sophisticated at tasks that require apparent decision-making, we're forced to confront what it means to choose. When a chess program selects its next move after evaluating millions of possible positions, is it making a free choice? Most of us would say no. It's simply executing its programming, following algorithms designed by human programmers. But the distinction might be less clear than it initially appears. The chess program's decision emerges from complex computational processes that weren't explicitly programmed by its creators. Modern AI systems learn and adapt, developing strategies and preferences that their programmers never anticipated. They exhibit creativity, generating solutions that surprise even their designers. At what point might such a system be considered truly autonomous rather than merely following sophisticated programming? The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider that human brains might be understood as biological computers, running programs written by evolution rather than human programmers. Your preferences, values, and decision-making strategies are shaped by genetic predispositions refined over millions of years of natural selection. The algorithms that guide your choices weren't designed by conscious intelligence, but emerged through the blind process of evolutionary trial and error. Yet this evolutionary programming is remarkably flexible and adaptive. Unlike a chess program designed for a specific task, your brain can learn new skills, develop new values, and adapt to novel situations that your ancestors never encountered. You can reflect on your own decision-making processes, critique your inherited tendencies, and deliberately work to change your behavior. This capacity for self-reflection and self-modification might be where genuine freedom emerges. The ability to step back from your immediate impulses and desires, to consider alternative courses of action, to imagine different futures and evaluate them according to your values. This metacognitive capacity might be the closest thing to free will that exists in a physical universe. You might not be free from causation, but you're free to participate in your own causation in increasingly sophisticated ways. Education, therapy, meditation, and other forms of mental training all work by expanding your capacity for this kind of reflective self-direction. When you learn to notice your automatic reactions and pause before acting on them, when you develop strategies for managing difficult emotions, when you cultivate new habits and break old ones, you're exercising and strengthening whatever freedom you possess. You're becoming a more active participant in the ongoing creation of yourself. This view suggests that free will isn't something you either have or lack completely, but something that exists in degrees and can be developed over time. A young child has less freedom than an adult because they have less capacity for reflection, planning, and self-control. Someone struggling with addiction or severe mental illness might have their freedom temporarily compromised. But in principle, every conscious being has some capacity for self-direction that can be nurtured and expanded. The social dimension of free will also deserves attention. Your choices don't emerge in isolation but are shaped by your relationships, your community, and your culture. The language you use to think about your options, the values that guide your decisions, even your conception of what it means to choose. All of these are inherited from the social world around you. You're free, but you're free within a context that profoundly shapes the possibilities available to you. This social embeddedness of choice doesn't diminish your freedom so much as reveal its collaborative nature. Your decisions emerge from the intersection of your individual psychology and the collective wisdom of your culture. You're the author of your choices, but you're writing in a language created by countless others, using ideas and values developed through generations of human experience. The question of moral responsibility remains complex even if we accept some version of free will. If your choices emerge from factors largely beyond your control, your genetics, your upbringing, your cultural context, your brain chemistry, then to what extent should you be held accountable for your actions? This question has profound implications for criminal justice, education, and how we treat one another in daily life. Perhaps the key insight is that moral responsibility, like free will itself, comes in degrees and can be developed over time. A person who commits a crime while struggling with severe mental illness bears different responsibility than someone who commits the same crime with full awareness and deliberate intent. Someone who has been given opportunities for education and moral development bears different responsibility than someone who has been deprived of such opportunities. Rather than asking whether people are ultimately responsible for their actions, we might ask how we can create conditions that support the development of greater freedom and responsibility. How can we design institutions, communities, and relationships that nurture people's capacity for reflective choice and moral growth? How can we balance accountability with compassion, holding people responsible while also recognizing the complex factors that shape their behavior? As you rest there now, perhaps feeling your thoughts becoming softer and more dreamlike, consider how this question of free will touches your own life. Think about a recent decision you made, something significant enough that you spent time deliberating about it. Can you trace the various influences that shaped your choice? Your past experiences, your relationships, your values, your circumstances, the random events that brought certain options to your attention. Notice how your decision emerged from this complex web of influences without being simply determined by any single factor. You were neither completely free nor completely constrained, but something more nuanced. A conscious being capable of reflective choice within the context of your particular history and situation. Perhaps the deepest truth about free will is that it's not something we have in the way we have possessions, but something we do in the way we perform activities. Freedom is enacted rather than owned, exercised rather than possessed. Each moment of genuine reflection, each pause between impulse and action, each effort to understand and improve yourself, represents freedom in action, regardless of the ultimate metaphysical status of your choices. The question of free will becomes even more intriguing when we consider the nature of time itself. We experience time as flowing from past to future, with the present moment as a moving boundary between what has already been determined and what remains open to possibility. But physics suggests a more complex picture. In Einstein's theory of relativity, past, present, and future exist simultaneously in what physicists call the block universe. From this perspective, all moments in time are equally real, stretching out like frames in an eternal film reel. If this view is correct, then your entire life, from birth to death, already exists as a complete four-dimensional object in space-time. Your future choices, the ones you haven't made yet from your current perspective, are already there, written into the fabric of reality itself. This doesn't necessarily mean they're determined by prior causes, but it does suggest that the open future you experience might be more like reading a book than writing one. You discover what comes next rather than creating it. Yet even this seemingly fatalistic picture leaves room for something like free will. If your future choices are indeed already real in some sense, they're still your choices. The decisions written into the block universe are the ones that emerge from your particular psychology, your values, your deliberative processes. You might be discovering rather than creating your future, but you're discovering a future that authentically reflects who you are. Think about how this might feel from the inside. Right now, you're listening to these words, perhaps feeling drowsy, maybe adjusting your position to get more comfortable. These actions feel spontaneous, chosen in the moment. But if the block universe view is correct, this entire sequence, your listening, your drowsiness, even the particular thoughts arising in your mind, already exists as part of the eternal structure of space-time. You're not creating these experiences so much as moving through them, like a train following tracks that stretch infinitely in both directions. The metaphor isn't perfect though, because unlike a train passenger, you're not separate from the journey. You are the journey in a sense. Your consciousness, your capacity for experience and choice, is woven into the very fabric of what already exists. The block universe doesn't diminish your agency so much as reveal it to be something more mysterious and profound than we typically imagine. This brings us to one of the deepest puzzles in the philosophy of mind, the relationship between subjective experience and objective reality. When you make a choice, there's something it feels like from the inside. You experience deliberation, uncertainty, the weighing of options, the moment of decision. This subjective dimension of choice seems crucial to free will, yet it's also the aspect that's hardest to study scientifically. Neuroscience can show us patterns of brain activity that correlate with decision-making, but it can't capture the felt quality of choosing. When you decide to forgive someone who has hurt you, brain scans might reveal changes in activity in your prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate, and other regions associated with emotional regulation and moral reasoning. But these objective measurements miss something essential: what it actually feels like to let go of resentment, to choose compassion over anger, to open your heart despite the risk of further hurt. This subjective dimension might be where the real action is when it comes to free will. Perhaps freedom isn't primarily about whether your choices could have been different in some objective sense, but about the quality of consciousness that accompanies your decision-making. When you choose with full awareness, with careful consideration of your values and the likely consequences of your actions, with genuine care for the well-being of yourself and others, you're exercising freedom regardless of whether that choice was predetermined by prior causes. Consider the difference between acting from impulse and acting from reflection. When you lash out in anger without thinking, your action might be free in the sense that no external force compelled it, but it doesn't feel free from the inside. You might immediately regret what you said or did, feeling as though you are driven by forces beyond your control. Your own emotions and reactions feel alien, imposed upon you rather than chosen by you. But when you pause before responding, when you feel the anger arise and then consciously decide how to express it, or whether to express it at all, the resulting action has a different quality. Even if this pause and reflection were themselves determined by your brain chemistry and past experiences, they represent a form of self-possession, a moment where you're more fully present to your own agency. You're not just reacting, you're responding, bringing your full consciousness to bear on the situation. This distinction between reaction and response might be crucial to understanding human freedom. We might not be free from causation, but we can become increasingly free to participate consciously in our own causation. The practices that cultivate this kind of freedom, meditation, therapy, education, moral reflection, work by expanding the space between stimulus and response, creating room for consciousness to operate more fully. Buddhism has long recognized this principle in its understanding of suffering and liberation. According to Buddhist psychology, we suffer not because bad things happen to us, but because we react to what happens with craving, aversion, and ignorance. We want things to be different than they are. We push away experiences we find unpleasant, and we fail to see clearly the impermanent, interdependent nature of reality. These reactions are conditioned responses, automatic patterns learned through repetition and reinforcement. But Buddhism also teaches that these patterns can be changed through mindful awareness. When you learn to observe your reactions without immediately acting on them, when you see clearly how anger or fear or desire arise and pass away in consciousness, you begin to have choice about how to respond. You're not eliminating causation, you're participating in it more consciously, becoming an active collaborator in your own mental conditioning rather than a passive victim of it. The meditative traditions offer a laboratory for exploring the nature of free will through direct experience. When you sit quietly and observe your own mind, you quickly discover that you can't simply choose what to think about. Thoughts arise spontaneously, often contrary to your intentions. You might decide to focus on your breath, only to find your mind wandering to your plans for tomorrow, a conversation from last week, or some random memory from childhood. At first, this can be frustrating. If you can't even control your own thoughts, what kind of free will do you really have? But deeper practice reveals something more subtle. While you can't dictate what thoughts arise, you can choose how to relate to them. You can notice when your mind has wandered and gently return attention to your chosen object of focus. You can observe thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them. You can cultivate qualities like patience, compassion, and equanimity through repeated practice. This kind of mental training reveals that freedom might be less about controlling what happens and more about choosing how to respond to what happens. You can't stop thoughts from arising, but you can stop identifying with every thought that appears. You can't prevent difficult emotions from occurring, but you can learn to experience them without being overwhelmed or driven to reactive behavior. The neuroscience of meditation supports this understanding. Regular meditation practice literally changes the structure and function of the brain, strengthening areas associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness while reducing activity in regions linked to mind-wandering and self-referential thinking. These changes suggest that the capacity for conscious choice can be enhanced through training, that freedom is not a fixed property but a skill that can be developed. Yet even these insights don't resolve the deeper metaphysical questions about free will. If your decision to meditate, your ability to develop greater self-awareness, and the changes in your brain that result from practice are all determined by prior causes, then in what sense are you truly free? Perhaps you're just a more sophisticated kind of robot, programmed by evolution and culture to be capable of self-modification, but still ultimately following the dictates of forces beyond your control. This line of thinking can lead to a kind of philosophical vertigo, an endless regress where every apparent source of freedom turns out to be conditioned by something else. Your choices are conditioned by your values are shaped by your experiences are filtered through your biology is determined by your genes and environment. At each level, what seems like freedom dissolves into conditioning. But perhaps this regress itself reveals something important. The search for some ultimate, unconditioned source of free will might be misguided, like looking for the place where a river begins. A river emerges gradually from countless streams and springs, each fed by rainfall that depends on weather patterns, ocean currents, and solar energy. There's no single point where the river springs into existence, uncaused by anything else, yet the river is undeniably real and flows with genuine power. Your agency might be similar, emerging from the complex interaction of countless factors without requiring some ultimate unconditioned source. You are the confluence of your genetics, your experiences, your relationships, your culture, your moment-to-moment choices and responses. No single factor determines who you are or what you do, but all of them together create the dynamic system that is uniquely you. This perspective suggests that the question, "Do you have free will?" might be less important than the question, "How can you exercise whatever freedom you possess most skillfully? Even if your capacity for choice is limited and conditioned, it's still real and consequential." The decisions you make shape your future experiences, influence other people, and contribute to the ongoing creation of the world you inhabit. Consider how this understanding might change your relationship to your own mistakes and limitations. If you accept that your actions emerge from complex causes that you don't fully control, you might develop greater compassion for your own imperfections. You can take responsibility for your behavior without carrying the crushing burden of absolute self-blame. You can work to change patterns that cause suffering while recognizing that change takes time and often happens in ways you can't predict or control. The same understanding can transform how you relate to others. When someone behaves in ways that hurt or frustrate you, you might remember that their actions, like yours, emerge from a complex web of factors that shaped their psychology long before you encountered them. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for boundaries and consequences, but it can help you respond with greater wisdom and less reactivity. The legal system has begun to grapple with these insights in fascinating ways. Traditional notions of criminal justice rest on the assumption that criminals freely choose to break the law and therefore deserve punishment. But growing understanding of how factors like childhood trauma, mental illness, addiction, and social disadvantage influence behavior has led to more nuanced approaches that emphasize rehabilitation over pure retribution. Some philosophers and legal scholars argue for even more radical reforms based on free will skepticism. If criminals don't have ultimate control over their actions, then perhaps punishment is never truly deserved, and the justice system should focus entirely on protecting society and helping offenders change their behavior. Others worry that abandoning moral responsibility altogether would undermine the social fabric and fail to honor the dignity of both victims and perpetrators. The debate continues, but it illustrates how questions about free will have real-world consequences that extend far beyond academic philosophy. How we understand human agency shapes our institutions, our relationships, and our sense of what it means to live a meaningful life. As you lie there now, perhaps noticing how your body naturally relaxes as sleep approaches, you might reflect on your own experience of agency. Throughout your day, you made countless choices, from what to wear and eat to how to respond to various challenges and opportunities. Some of these choices felt deliberate and carefully considered, others seemed to happen almost automatically. Some aligned perfectly with your values and intentions, others might have surprised you or left you wondering why you acted as you did. All of these choices, whether free or determined, have contributed to who you are in this moment. They've shaped your relationships, your circumstances, your habits of thought and feeling. They've created the particular history that is uniquely yours, the stream of experiences that flows through your consciousness as you listen to these words. Tomorrow you'll wake up and face new choices, new opportunities to exercise whatever freedom you possess. You might choose to be a little more patient with a difficult colleague, a bit more generous with a friend, more honest with yourself about something you've been avoiding. These choices might feel small and ordinary, but they participate in the ongoing creation of yourself and your world. The mystery of free will might never be completely solved. The relationship between consciousness and causation, between subjective experience and objective reality, between freedom and determinism, these questions probe the deepest foundations of existence itself. But perhaps the mystery is part of the beauty. Living with uncertainty about the ultimate nature of your own agency might keep you humble, curious, and open to the ongoing adventure of becoming who you are. In the gentle space between waking and sleeping, between certainty and doubt, between freedom and determinism, you can rest in the simple fact of your own existence. You're here, aware, capable of reflection and choice within whatever constraints define your situation. Whether your next thought is freely chosen or inevitably determined, it will be genuinely yours, emerging from the unique constellation of factors that make you who you are. The question of free will invites you to pay closer attention to the subtle mechanics of your own mind, to notice the interplay between intention and action, between conscious will and unconscious processing. This attention itself might be the most practical form of freedom available, the capacity to be present to your own experience as it unfolds, moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. As your breathing naturally slows and your thoughts begin to drift, you might find yourself letting go of the need to solve this ancient puzzle completely. Perhaps it's enough to live with the question, to remain curious about the nature of your own agency while exercising whatever freedom you have with wisdom and care. The mystery of free will is also the mystery of consciousness itself, of how subjective experience arises from objective processes, of how meaning emerges from mechanism. And in this mystery there's something beautiful and profound. You're not just a passive observer of your life, but an active participant in its unfolding. Whether through free will or determined processes or some subtle combination of both, you contribute to the ongoing creation of reality through every choice you make, every relationship you nurture, every moment of awareness you bring to your experience. The ancient question continues to evolve, but perhaps its greatest value lies not in the answer it might eventually yield, but in how it deepens your appreciation for the remarkable phenomenon of human consciousness. You're a being capable of reflecting on your own nature, of questioning the foundations of your own existence, of participating consciously in whatever processes give rise to your thoughts and actions. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you carry this question with you into dreams where the boundaries between self and world, between freedom and determinism, become even more fluid and mysterious. In the realm of dreams, you'll make choices that feel completely real while following narratives that emerge from processes entirely beyond your conscious control. Perhaps this nightly journey into the unconscious offers its own insights into the nature of human agency, revealing how freedom and determinism might coexist in ways that transcend our usual categories of understanding. The question of free will remains open, inviting your continued exploration as you wake each day to face new choices, new opportunities to exercise whatever freedom you possess. Whether you choose your breakfast or it chooses you, whether you decide to be kind or kindness decides to flow through you, you participate in the ongoing mystery of consciousness, encountering itself in the mirror of existence. The paradox deepens when we consider how the very act of questioning free will might itself be an expression of whatever freedom we possess. Here you are, late at night, choosing to contemplate one of philosophy's most enduring mysteries rather than simply accepting your experience at face value. This capacity for self-reflection, for stepping back from the immediate flow of experience to examine its underlying nature, seems to represent something uniquely human and potentially free. Yet even this metacognitive ability raises questions. Did you choose to become curious about free will, or did curiosity about free will choose you? Perhaps the distinction itself is artificial, a remnant of our tendency to divide experience into subject and object, chooser and chosen, when the reality might be more fluid and integrated. Consider how your sense of identity relates to your choices. When you act in ways that feel authentic, that align with your deepest values and commitments, there's a quality of freedom in that alignment, even if the values themselves arose from factors beyond your control. You didn't choose your initial temperament, your early experiences, or the cultural context that shaped your moral intuitions. Yet the person who emerged from these influences is genuinely you, and when you act from this authentic self, there's a coherence and integrity that feels free. This suggests that freedom might be less about escaping causation entirely, and more about achieving a kind of harmony between different levels of yourself. When your conscious intentions align with your deeper values, when your actions flow from careful reflection rather than reactive impulse, when you respond to situations with wisdom rather than mere conditioning, you're exercising a meaningful form of agency, regardless of whether that agency could be otherwise in some ultimate sense. The relationship between freedom and authenticity becomes even more interesting when we consider how authenticity itself develops over time. You weren't born with a fixed, predetermined set of values and preferences. These aspects of your identity emerge gradually through your interactions with the world, your relationships with others, your encounters with ideas and experiences that challenged or confirmed your developing sense of who you are. In this ongoing process of becoming, You're neither the passive recipient of external influences nor the autonomous creator of your own identity. You're something more complex, a dynamic system that responds to influences while also actively interpreting and integrating them according to your existing patterns of meaning-making. Each new experience is filtered through your current understanding, but it also has the potential to modify that understanding in subtle or dramatic ways. This interactive process might be where genuine agency resides. While you can't control what influences you encounter, you do participate in how those influences are integrated into your ongoing sense of self. When you read a book that challenges your assumptions, when you have a conversation that opens new possibilities, when you experience something that shifts your perspective, you're not just passively receiving information. You're actively engaging with it, questioning it, relating it to your existing knowledge and values, deciding what to accept, reject, or hold in creative tension. The role of attention in this process deserves special consideration. Your capacity to direct your attention, to choose what to focus on and how long to sustain that focus, might represent one of the most fundamental forms of freedom available to conscious beings. Right now, as you listen to these words, you could choose to let your attention drift to other thoughts, to focus on the physical sensations in your body, or to engage more deeply with the philosophical questions we're exploring. This freedom of attention is both limited and real. You can't simply decide to pay attention and have perfect control over your focus. Your mind will wander despite your best intentions, pulled by worries, memories, physical discomfort, or simple fatigue. Yet you do have some influence over the direction and quality of your attention, and this influence can be strengthened through practice and training. The cultivation of attention through contemplative practices reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness and choice. When you learn to observe your own mind with patient awareness, you begin to see the constant stream of thoughts, emotions, and sensations that normally operates below the threshold of conscious recognition. You discover that much of what you consider your mental activity happens automatically, without conscious direction or control. But you also discover something else, a quality of awareness that can observe this automatic activity without being completely identified with it. This observing awareness doesn't seem to be produced by thinking. It's more like the space in which thinking occurs. It's not an emotion, though it can be aware of emotions. It's not a sensation, though it can notice sensations. This awareness seems to have a different quality than the mental contents it observes, a quality that feels somehow more fundamental and stable. Some contemplative traditions identify this observing awareness as the closest thing to what we might call the true self, the aspect of consciousness that remains present through all the changing contents of experience. From this perspective, freedom isn't about the ego mind's ability to control thoughts and choices, but about recognizing this deeper awareness and learning to act from that recognition, rather than from the reactive patterns of conditioned thinking. This view doesn't solve the metaphysical puzzle of free will, but it does offer a different way of understanding what it might mean to be free. Instead of asking whether you can ultimately control your choices, you might ask whether you can recognize the awareness in which all choices arise and learn to act from that deeper recognition, rather than from the surface turbulence of automatic reactivity. The implications extend beyond personal practice into how we understand moral development and ethical behavior. If freedom is fundamentally about the quality of awareness you bring to your choices rather than the ultimate causal status of those choices, then moral education becomes less about imposing rules and more about cultivating wisdom, compassion, and clear seeing. When you act harmfully toward others, it's often because you're caught up in narrow self-concern, reacting from fear, anger, or desire without seeing clearly the broader context of your actions. You might be defending your ego, pursuing immediate gratification, or trying to control situations in ways that actually create more suffering for yourself and others. In these moments, your choices emerge from a kind of unconsciousness, a failure to see clearly what's actually happening and what response would serve the larger good. But when you act with genuine care and wisdom, it's often because you're seeing more clearly, recognizing the interconnection between your well-being and the well-being of others, responding from a place of expanded awareness rather than contracted self-protection. These wise and compassionate actions don't necessarily require you to have ultimate metaphysical freedom. They require you to be present and aware in ways that allow your deeper understanding and care to inform your responses. This perspective suggests that the development of ethical behavior is inseparable from the development of consciousness itself. As you become more aware of the subtle dynamics of your own mind, more sensitive to the effects of your actions on others, more skilled at responding rather than reacting, you naturally become more capable of choices that serve the larger good. This isn't because you've gained some supernatural power to transcend causation, but because you've developed the capacity to participate more consciously and skillfully in your own conditioning. The social dimensions of this understanding are profound. If everyone's behavior emerges from complex conditioning processes that operate largely below conscious awareness, then creating positive change in the world becomes less about judging and punishing, and more about understanding and transforming the conditions that give rise to harmful behaviors. This doesn't eliminate accountability, but it contextualizes it within a broader understanding of how consciousness and conditioning interact. Educational systems might focus more on developing emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and contemplative awareness alongside traditional academic subjects. Criminal justice systems might emphasize rehabilitation and addressing root causes rather than purely punitive approaches. Mental health care might integrate wisdom traditions that cultivate awareness alongside therapeutic techniques that address symptoms and behaviors. These possibilities don't depend on resolving the free will debate definitively. They emerge from recognizing that human behavior, whether ultimately free or determined, can be influenced by the quality of awareness and understanding people bring to their lives. This influence might itself be conditioned by countless factors, but it's still real and consequential within the web of causes and conditions that shape human experience. As you rest there now, perhaps feeling your body settling more deeply into relaxation, you might notice how these philosophical reflections naturally lead back to the immediate reality of your present experience. The question of free will, however fascinating, ultimately matters because of how it affects your actual life, your relationships, your sense of meaning and purpose, your approach to growth and change. Whether or not you have free will in some ultimate metaphysical sense, you undoubtedly have the experience of choosing, deliberating, deciding, and acting. This experience feels meaningful to you, and it shapes how you navigate the world. The choices you make, whether free or determined, contribute to the ongoing creation of your character, your relationships, and your circumstances. Perhaps the wisest approach is to hold the question of free will lightly, remaining curious about its ultimate answer, while fully engaging with whatever capacity for choice and agency you actually possess. You can work to develop greater self-awareness, emotional regulation, and ethical sensitivity without needing to resolve the deepest metaphysical questions about the nature of that development. You can take responsibility for your actions while also recognizing the complex web of factors that shape your behavior. You can strive to make choices that align with your deepest values while remaining humble about your ability to fully understand or control the processes that give rise to those choices. You can treat yourself and others with compassion while still maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations. This balanced approach acknowledges both the reality of conditioning and the possibility of conscious influence within that conditioning. It honors both the scientific understanding of human behavior as emerging from natural processes and the felt sense of agency that characterizes conscious experience. It takes seriously both the deterministic insights of neuroscience and the liberating possibilities revealed by contemplative practice. The question of free will thus becomes not just an abstract philosophical puzzle, but a practical inquiry into how to live most skillfully with whatever capacity for choice and agency you actually possess. It invites you to pay closer attention to your own decision-making processes, to notice the factors that influence your choices, and to explore how you might participate more consciously in your own ongoing development. In the gentle space between waking and sleeping, these deep questions can settle into a kind of peaceful uncertainty. You don't need to solve the mystery of free will tonight or perhaps ever. It's enough to live with the question, to let it inform your choices without demanding final answers, to appreciate both the freedom you experience and the conditioning that shapes that experience. The ancient debate continues in universities and research laboratories around the world, but it also continues in the quiet moments of your daily life, when you pause before responding to a difficult situation, when you choose compassion over judgment, when you act from your deeper values rather than your immediate impulses. In these moments, you participate in whatever freedom is available to conscious beings, regardless of how that freedom might ultimately be explained or understood. As your thoughts begin to slow and fragment in the approach of sleep, you carry this question into the realm where conscious control gives way to unconscious processing, where the boundaries between self and world become fluid, where new possibilities can emerge from the depths of mind. In dreams, you'll make choices that feel completely real, while following narratives that emerge from processes entirely beyond your waking control, perhaps offering their own insights into the mysterious relationship between freedom and determinism. The question of free will remains beautifully, mysteriously open, inviting your continued exploration as you navigate the ongoing adventure of conscious existence. Whether you choose your path, or it chooses you, whether you author your story or discover it, you participate in the remarkable phenomenon of awareness, knowing itself through the mirror of choice and action, forever deepening the mystery of what it means to be a conscious being in an interconnected universe. And so we find ourselves at a curious juncture in this gentle exploration, where the very act of questioning free will might reveal something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. As you lie there, perhaps feeling your thoughts becoming softer, more dreamlike, consider how the question itself seems to emerge from a deeper mystery. The mystery of awareness turning back upon itself, consciousness examining its own nature with the same tools it uses to navigate the world. This reflexive quality of human consciousness is remarkable when you pause to consider it. You can think about thinking, feel yourself feeling, observe yourself observing. Right now, as these words flow through your awareness, there's a part of your mind that can step back and notice the very process of understanding, the way meaning seems to crystallize from the stream of sounds and symbols. This capacity for self-reflection might be the closest thing to genuine freedom that exists in a physical universe. But even this metacognitive ability raises intriguing questions. When you observe your own thoughts, what exactly is doing the observing? Is there some essential you that stands apart from the stream of mental activity, watching thoughts come and go like clouds across an inner sky? Or is this sense of an observing self just another mental phenomenon, another pattern of neural activity that creates the illusion of separation between observer and observed? The contemplative traditions have explored these questions for millennia, developing sophisticated maps of consciousness that reveal layers of awareness most of us never notice. In deep meditation, practitioners often report encountering a quality of consciousness that seems more fundamental than ordinary thinking, a spacious awareness that remains present whether thoughts are active or still, whether emotions are turbulent or calm, whether the body is comfortable or uncomfortable. This deeper awareness doesn't seem to choose in the way we normally think of choosing. It doesn't deliberate or analyze or weigh options. Yet there's something profoundly free about it, a quality of openness and presence that isn't constrained by the usual patterns of mental conditioning. From this perspective, freedom might not be about the ego mind's ability to control outcomes, but about recognizing and resting in this more fundamental dimension of consciousness. The implications are both humbling and liberating. If your truest nature is this open awareness rather than the thinking mind with all its plans and preferences, then the question of whether your thoughts and choices are free becomes less central. The thoughts arise and pass away, choices get made, actions unfold, all within the vast space of awareness that remains fundamentally untouched by these movements. This doesn't mean your choices don't matter, or that you should become passive. Quite the opposite. When you act from this deeper recognition, your choices often become more spontaneous and appropriate, arising naturally from clear seeing rather than from the complex calculations of the strategic mind. It's like the difference between forcing a smile and allowing genuine joy to express itself through your face. Consider how this might apply to moral decision-making. When you're caught up in narrow self-concern, ethical choices often feel difficult and constraining. You might want to lie to avoid consequences, to take more than your share, to prioritize your immediate desires over others' well-being. Acting ethically requires willpower, the strength to override these selfish impulses with moral principles. But when you're resting in a broader perspective, when you can see clearly the interconnection between your well-being and others' well-being, ethical action often arises naturally. You don't lie because you see that dishonesty creates suffering for everyone involved, including yourself. You share generously because you recognize that your security doesn't depend on hoarding resources. You treat others with kindness because you understand that their pain and your pain are not fundamentally separate. This natural ethics doesn't require you to have metaphysical free will, but it does require a kind of inner freedom. freedom from the compulsive patterns of fear, greed, and delusion that normally drive behavior. It's the freedom that comes from seeing clearly, rather than being lost in mental projections and emotional reactions. The development of this inner freedom is perhaps the most practical application of our inquiry into free will. Regardless of whether your choices are ultimately determined by prior causes, you can cultivate greater awareness, emotional balance, and wisdom. You can learn to pause before reacting, to respond from your deeper values rather than your immediate impulses, to hold your plans and preferences lightly while remaining fully engaged with life. This cultivation happens through countless small choices. The choice to take a deep breath when you feel anger arising, the choice to listen carefully when someone is speaking, the choice to notice beauty in ordinary moments, the choice to extend compassion to yourself when you make mistakes. Each of these micro-choices might be conditioned by your history and circumstances, but there are also opportunities to participate more consciously in your own development. The neuroscience of contemplative practice supports this understanding. Regular meditation, mindfulness training, and other awareness-based practices literally reshape the brain in beneficial ways. They strengthen networks associated with attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness, while weakening patterns linked to rumination, reactivity, and self-centered thinking. These changes suggest that whatever freedom you possess can be enhanced through patient training. Yet the relationship between effort and grace in this development remains mysterious. You can commit to a meditation practice, but you can't force profound insights to arise. You can work to cultivate patience, but the moments of genuine understanding often come as gifts, emerging from depths you didn't know existed. This interplay between personal effort and something beyond personal control mirrors the broader question of free will itself. Perhaps this is why the question feels so alive, so resistant to simple answers. It touches the fundamental mystery of what it means to be a conscious being in an apparently unconscious universe, to experience choice and agency within processes that seem to operate according to impersonal laws. You are simultaneously the author and the audience of your own experience, the sculptor and the sculpture, the dreamer and the dream. The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the social dimensions of consciousness. Your sense of self, your values, your very capacity for language and abstract thought all emerge from your embeddedness in human culture. You didn't choose your native language, but that language shapes how you think about everything, including free will itself. You didn't select your cultural background, but it provides the conceptual frameworks through which you interpret your experience. This social construction of selfhood doesn't eliminate individual agency, but it reveals its collaborative nature. Your thoughts emerge from the intersection of your unique neural patterns and the collective wisdom of your species. Your choices reflect both your personal history and the accumulated insights of generations of human experience. You are neither completely independent nor completely determined by your social context, but something more interesting, a unique expression of universal human possibilities. The recognition of this interdependence can itself be liberating. When you realize that your thoughts and insights don't belong to you in any ultimate sense, that they arise from the vast web of relationships and influences that connect all conscious beings, the burden of having to figure everything out by yourself begins to lighten. You can participate in the collective human project of understanding without needing to solve every mystery individually. This collaborative aspect of consciousness extends into how we might approach the question of free will as a species. Rather than seeing this as a problem that individual thinkers must solve in isolation, we might recognize it as an ongoing inquiry that benefits from diverse perspectives, multiple methodologies, and patient dialogue across disciplines and traditions. The neuroscientists contribute their insights about brain function and decision-making. The physicists offer their understanding of causation and determinism at the most fundamental levels of reality. The philosophers provide conceptual clarity and logical rigor. The contemplatives share their discoveries about the nature of consciousness itself. The poets and artists reveal dimensions of human experience that scientific analysis might miss. None of these perspectives alone can capture the full mystery of human agency, but together they create a richer understanding than any single approach could provide. This collaborative inquiry mirrors the collaborative nature of consciousness itself, your individual awareness participating in the larger project of the universe coming to know itself. As you rest there now, perhaps feeling the gentle pull of sleep beginning to take hold, You might reflect on how this question has woven itself through your own life experience. Think about moments when you felt most free, perhaps times when you acted with spontaneous kindness, when you made decisions that aligned perfectly with your deepest values, when you responded to challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. What was the quality of consciousness present in those moments? Notice too the times when you felt most constrained, perhaps when you were caught in compulsive patterns of thinking or behavior, when you acted against your better judgment, when you felt driven by forces you couldn't quite understand or control. What was different about the quality of awareness in those experiences? These personal observations might offer more insight into the nature of freedom than any amount of abstract theorizing. Your own experience is the laboratory where questions about free will become concrete and practical. It's where philosophical inquiry meets the lived reality of making choices, facing consequences, and gradually learning to navigate life with greater skill and wisdom. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't require you to solve the metaphysical puzzle definitively. You can remain agnostic about whether free will exists in some ultimate sense, while still working to enhance whatever capacity for conscious choice you actually possess. You can hold the question lightly while engaging fully with the practical work of becoming more aware, more compassionate, more responsive to the needs of each moment. This practical engagement with the question of freedom might actually be more transformative than any theoretical answer could be. When you pay close attention to your own decision-making processes, when you notice the factors that influence your choices, when you experiment with different ways of responding to challenging situations, you're not just gathering data about free will, you're actively participating in whatever freedom is available to you. The question thus becomes a doorway rather than a destination, an invitation to explore the depths of your own consciousness, rather than a problem to be solved once and for all. Each moment of genuine choice, whether free or determined, becomes an opportunity to express whatever wisdom and compassion you've cultivated, to contribute something beneficial to the ongoing dance of existence. Consider how this understanding might influence your approach to personal growth and self-improvement. Instead of trying to force yourself to change through willpower alone, you might focus on creating conditions that support the natural emergence of positive qualities. You might cultivate environments and relationships that encourage your best impulses while minimizing triggers for reactive patterns. You might approach your habits and tendencies with curiosity rather than judgment, investigating the conditions under which helpful behaviors arise and understanding the factors that lead to patterns you'd like to change. This approach honors both the reality of conditioning and the possibility of conscious influence within that conditioning. The same understanding can transform your relationships with others. When someone behaves in ways that frustrate or hurt you, you might remember that their actions, like yours, emerge from complex webs of causation that they may not fully understand or control. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for boundaries, but it can help you respond with greater wisdom and less reactivity. You might find yourself becoming more interested in understanding than in judging, more focused on how to respond skillfully than on whether others deserve blame or praise. This shift in attention can actually be more effective at encouraging positive change both in yourself and others than moral condemnation or attempts at control. The question of free will also invites reflection on the nature of time and how it relates to human agency. We experience time as flowing from past to future, with the present moment as the only point where choice seems possible. The past feels fixed and unchangeable, while the future appears open and undetermined. Yet modern physics suggests that this experience of temporal flow might be somewhat illusory, that all moments in time might exist simultaneously in the block universe of relativity theory. If this is true, then your entire life, from birth to death, might already exist as a complete four-dimensional structure in space-time. Your future choices, the ones you haven't made yet from your current perspective, might already be real in some sense, written into the fabric of reality itself. This possibility raises fascinating questions about the relationship between subjective experience and objective reality, between the felt sense of choosing and the ultimate nature of time itself. Yet even if your entire life path already exists in some timeless sense, it would still be your path, emerging from your particular consciousness, your unique way of processing information and responding to circumstances. The choices written into the block universe, if it exists, would be authentically yours, even if they couldn't be otherwise. This perspective might actually be liberating rather than constraining. If you could glimpse your life from this timeless perspective, you might see the perfect appropriateness of each choice, each experience, each apparent mistake or victory. You might recognize a kind of cosmic intelligence operating through the seeming randomness of personal history, a deeper order that transcends your ordinary understanding of cause and effect. The mystics and poets have long intuited this possibility, sensing that individual lives participate in some larger pattern or purpose that only becomes visible from a broader perspective. They speak of surrendering personal will to divine will, of aligning individual choice with cosmic intelligence, of recognizing that the deepest freedom comes from perfect harmony with what is. This doesn't necessarily require belief in any particular religious or metaphysical system. It might simply reflect the recognition that your individual consciousness is embedded within larger systems of intelligence, biological, ecological, social, perhaps even cosmic, that operate according to principles you can only dimly perceive. Your choices might express not only your personal preferences, but also the deeper wisdom of these larger systems. As you lie there now, feeling your breathing naturally slow and deepen, you might sense this larger intelligence operating through your own relaxation response. You're not consciously directing your heart rate to decrease or your muscles to release tension, yet these changes are happening in perfect coordination with your need for rest. Your body knows how to prepare for sleep without requiring conscious management, following ancient rhythms that connect you to the larger patterns of day and night, season and cycle. This natural intelligence extends into all dimensions of your existence. Your immune system knows how to recognize and respond to threats without conscious direction. Your digestive system processes nutrients according to complex biochemical protocols you never learned. Your brain consolidates memories and processes emotions during sleep through mechanisms that operate entirely below the threshold of awareness. Perhaps your conscious choices participate in this same natural intelligence, emerging from the intersection of your individual awareness and the larger wisdom that operates through all living systems. Your decisions might reflect not only your personal preferences, but also the deeper intelligence of life itself, seeking balance, growth, healing, and connection through the particular circumstances of your individual existence. This possibility suggests that the question of free will might be less about whether you have autonomous control over your choices, and more about how consciously you can participate in the intelligence that's already operating through you. When you make decisions that feel deeply right, that align with your authentic nature and serve the larger good, you might be expressing this natural intelligence most clearly. The cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and awareness might be ways of removing obstacles to this natural intelligence, rather than trying to impose your personal will on circumstances. Like clearing debris from a stream so water can flow freely, contemplative practice might work by removing the mental and emotional patterns that obscure your deeper knowing and prevent you from responding appropriately to each situation. This understanding doesn't resolve the free will debate definitively, but it does suggest a way of living that honors both the mystery of choice and the reality of conditioning. You can work to become more transparent to whatever wisdom wants to express itself through your unique circumstances, more responsive to the needs of each moment, more aligned with the deeper currents of intelligence that flow through all existence. The question of free will thus becomes an invitation to participate more consciously in the ongoing creation of reality, to recognize your role as both individual agent and expression of universal intelligence, to embrace both personal responsibility and humble recognition of the vast forces that shape your existence. In this participation, you might find a freedom that transcends the usual categories of determinism and autonomy, a freedom that emerges from perfect harmony with what is. As sleep approaches and these philosophical reflections begin to dissolve into the wordless wisdom of dreams, you carry this question with you into the realm where conscious control gives way to unconscious processing, where the boundaries between self and world become fluid, where new possibilities can emerge from the depths of mind. The mystery of free will continues its ancient dance, forever inviting your deeper participation in the grand adventure of conscious existence. And perhaps this is where the deepest insights about free will emerge, not from abstract theorizing, but from the intimate experience of consciousness itself as it moves between states of activity and rest. As your mind begins to settle into the gentler rhythms that precede sleep, notice how the very quality of your awareness is shifting. The sharp focus of analytical thinking is softening into something more fluid and receptive. The urgent sense of needing to understand or control is giving way to a natural willingness to simply be present with whatever arises. This transition might offer its own teaching about the nature of human agency. In waking consciousness, you feel like the director of your mental activity, choosing what to think about, deciding how to respond to various situations, maintaining a sense of being in charge of your inner world. But as sleep approaches, this sense of executive control naturally dissolves. Thoughts begin to drift and associate in unexpected ways. Images arise spontaneously. The boundaries between memory and imagination, between self and world, become increasingly permeable. Yet this dissolution doesn't feel like a loss of freedom so much as an entry into a different kind of freedom. The freedom of letting go, of allowing consciousness to reorganize itself according to its own deeper rhythms. In this liminal space between waking and sleeping, you might glimpse something profound about the nature of choice itself. Perhaps the freedom you experience isn't primarily about imposing your will on circumstances, but about learning when to act and when to allow, when to direct and when to receive. Consider how this plays out in your daily experience of creativity and insight. The most profound solutions to problems often arise not through forced concentration, but through a kind of relaxed attention that allows new connections to emerge spontaneously. Artists speak of getting out of their own way, of becoming conduits for something larger than their personal intentions. Scientists describe breakthrough discoveries that come in moments of reverie, when the analytical mind steps aside and deeper patterns become visible. These experiences suggest that consciousness might be more like a garden than a machine, something that can be tended and cultivated but not directly controlled. You can create conditions that support the growth of wisdom, compassion, and clarity, but you can't force these qualities to emerge through willpower alone. They arise naturally when the soil of awareness is properly prepared and the obstacles to their expression are gradually removed. This understanding has profound implications for how you might approach personal transformation. Rather than trying to force yourself to change through sheer determination, you might focus on creating the inner and outer conditions that naturally support positive development. This might involve practices that cultivate awareness, relationships that encourage your best qualities, environments that reduce stress and promote reflection, and activities that align with your deepest values. The process becomes less about overcoming your nature and more about discovering what wants to emerge from the depths of your being when the conditions are right. Like a seed that contains within itself the entire blueprint of the tree it will become, your consciousness might already contain the potential for whatever wisdom and compassion you're capable of expressing. The work isn't to create these qualities from nothing, but to remove the obstacles that prevent their natural flowering. This perspective transforms how you might understand your struggles and limitations. Instead of viewing them as evidence of personal failure or lack of willpower, you might see them as information about the conditions that support or hinder your optimal functioning. When you find yourself caught in reactive patterns, instead of harsh self-judgment, you might become curious about what circumstances triggered these patterns and what different conditions might support more skillful responses. The same compassionate understanding can extend to others. When someone behaves in ways that seem destructive or unconscious, you might recognize that they too are complex systems responding to conditions, many of which they didn't choose and may not fully understand. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for boundaries and consequences, but it does suggest that lasting positive change often requires addressing underlying conditions rather than simply attempting to modify surface behaviors. Educational systems informed by this understanding might focus as much on creating supportive environments as on delivering information. They might recognize that learning happens most naturally when students feel safe, engaged, and connected to something meaningful. Criminal justice systems might emphasize rehabilitation and addressing root causes rather than purely punitive approaches, recognizing that antisocial behavior often emerges from conditions of trauma, inequality, and disconnection. Mental health care might integrate wisdom about the natural intelligence of consciousness with therapeutic techniques that help people reconnect with their innate capacity for healing and growth. Instead of viewing psychological symptoms only as disorders to be eliminated, practitioners might also see them as the psyche's attempts to restore balance and wholeness under difficult circumstances. These possibilities emerge naturally from recognizing that human behavior, whether ultimately free or determined, can be influenced by the quality of conditions in which it arises. This influence might itself be conditioned by countless factors, but it remains real and consequential within the web of causes and effects that shape human experience. As you rest there now, perhaps noticing how your body has naturally found its most comfortable position, you might observe this principle at work in your own immediate experience. You didn't consciously design the complex physiological processes that are preparing your body for sleep. Your nervous system is automatically shifting from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance. Your core body temperature is beginning to drop. Your brain is starting to produce the neurochemical cocktail that will carry you into dreams. Yet you did create some of the conditions that support this natural process. Perhaps you chose to lie down in a comfortable place, to listen to something soothing, to let go of the day's concerns and allow your mind to settle. These choices, whether free or determined, participate in the larger intelligence that knows how to restore and renew your system through sleep. This collaboration between conscious intention and unconscious wisdom might be a key to understanding human agency. You're neither completely in control nor completely helpless, but something more nuanced, a conscious participant in processes that extend far beyond your individual awareness. Your choices matter not because they give you ultimate control over outcomes, but because they influence the conditions that shape what emerges from the deeper layers of intelligence operating through you. The mystics have long recognized this partnership between personal effort and divine grace, between individual will and cosmic intelligence. They speak of working diligently while holding outcomes lightly, of acting with full commitment while recognizing that the results are ultimately beyond their control. This paradoxical approach might resolve the apparent conflict between free will and determinism by transcending the either-or framework that creates the problem in the first place. You can take full responsibility for your choices while simultaneously recognizing that those choices emerge from conditions largely beyond your control. You can work skillfully to create positive change while accepting that the timing and manner of that change may unfold in ways you cannot predict or direct. You can be both agent and instrument, both author and character in the ongoing story of your life. This understanding naturally leads to what the Buddhists call the middle way, a path that avoids both the extreme of believing you can control everything through willpower and the extreme of believing you have no influence at all. It's a way of engaging fully with life while holding your plans and preferences lightly, of acting decisively while remaining open to unexpected developments. The middle way applies not only to grand philosophical questions, but to the most mundane aspects of daily existence. When you're stuck in traffic, you can choose how to respond to the situation without being able to control when the traffic will clear. When someone treats you rudely, you can choose whether to respond with kindness or irritation, without being able to determine their future behavior. When you're facing a difficult decision, you can gather information and consider your options carefully while recognizing that some uncertainty will always remain. These everyday applications of the middle way gradually train you in the art of conscious participation, learning to exercise whatever agency you possess while accepting the limits of your control. Over time, this practice can lead to a kind of effortless effort, where appropriate action arises naturally from clear seeing, rather than from the strain of trying to force outcomes through personal will alone. Consider how this might apply to your approach to sleep itself. You can create helpful conditions, a comfortable environment, a regular bedtime routine, practices that calm your mind, but you cannot simply decide to fall asleep and have it happen instantly. Sleep comes when it comes, emerging from the natural rhythms of your body and brain when the conditions are right. Your role is to prepare and allow, to participate skillfully in a process that ultimately unfolds according to its own wisdom. The same principle applies to all the most important changes in human life: love, insight, healing, creativity, spiritual awakening. These profound transformations cannot be forced into existence through willpower alone. They require patient preparation, skillful means, and a willingness to allow something larger than your personal agenda to work through you. They emerge from the marriage of conscious intention and unconscious intelligence, of personal effort and impersonal grace. This recognition can bring tremendous relief to the burden of trying to control everything through individual effort. Instead of carrying the weight of believing you must single-handedly create all positive change in your life, you can learn to cooperate with the natural intelligence that's already operating through you and around you. Instead of swimming against the current, You can learn to read the deeper currents and find ways to move with them while still maintaining your chosen direction. The relief extends into how you hold your mistakes and failures. If your choices emerge from the complex intersection of consciousness and conditioning, then errors become opportunities for learning rather than evidence of fundamental inadequacy. When you act unskillfully, you can investigate what conditions led to that choice and work to create different conditions in the future, rather than simply condemning yourself for lacking sufficient willpower. This approach naturally cultivates patience with the process of change. Just as a garden doesn't transform overnight but evolves gradually through seasonal cycles, personal development unfolds according to its own organic timeline. You can tend the garden of your consciousness with care and consistency, while allowing the deeper processes of growth to operate at their own pace. The patience extends to your understanding of others as well. When someone you care about is struggling with destructive patterns or seems unable to make changes you think would help them, you can offer support and encouragement while recognizing that their transformation, like yours, must unfold from within according to conditions you cannot fully control or predict. This doesn't lead to passivity or indifference, but to a more skillful kind of engagement. When you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled, you free up energy for the kinds of influence that are actually available to you. You can focus on creating positive conditions, offering genuine care, modeling the changes you hope to see, and responding wisely to whatever emerges from these efforts. The distinction between influence and control becomes crucial here. You have tremendous influence on your own development, and some influence on the development of others, but this influence operates more like tending a garden than operating a machine. You can plant seeds, provide water and nutrients, remove weeds, and create protective conditions, but you cannot force growth to happen faster than the natural processes allow. This gardening metaphor reveals something beautiful about the relationship between effort and surrender in human development. The gardener works diligently, but also trusts in processes beyond their direct control, the intelligence of seeds, the rhythms of weather, the mysterious alchemy that transforms soil and sunlight into living plants. The work is real and necessary, but it succeeds only through partnership with natural forces that operate according to their own wisdom. As your breathing continues to slow and deepen, as your muscles release tension you didn't know you were holding, as your thoughts become softer and more dreamlike, you're witnessing this same kind of natural intelligence at work. Your body knows how to prepare for sleep, how to shift into the restorative states that will rebuild your energy and process the experiences of the day. Your conscious mind doesn't need to manage these processes, only to create conditions that support their natural unfolding. The question of free will begins to seem less important than the question of how to participate most skillfully in whatever processes are already operating through your consciousness. Whether your choices are ultimately free or determined, they still influence the conditions that shape your experience and the experiences of those around you. They still matter in the most practical sense, even if their ultimate metaphysical status remains mysterious. This practical approach to the question allows you to engage fully with life, while holding philosophical uncertainties lightly. You can work to develop greater awareness, compassion, and wisdom without needing to resolve the deepest questions about the nature of choice and causation. You can take responsibility for your actions while remaining humble about the limits of your understanding and control. The humility is important because it keeps you open to learning and growing. When you believe you have ultimate control over your choices and their consequences, you might become rigid in your approaches, unwilling to consider alternative perspectives or adapt to changing circumstances. But when you recognize that your agency operates within vast webs of interdependence and conditioning, you naturally become more curious, more flexible, more willing to experiment and learn from results. This openness to learning extends into how you relate to the philosophical question itself. Rather than needing to reach a final conclusion about whether free will exists, you can remain curious about what different perspectives might teach you. The hard determinists might help you develop greater compassion for human limitations and recognize the importance of addressing systemic conditions that shape behavior. The libertarians might inspire you to cherish and cultivate whatever genuine agency you possess. The compatibilists might show you how to hold apparent contradictions in creative tension. Each perspective offers insights that can inform how you live, regardless of which one ultimately proves most accurate. The question becomes a doorway into deeper understanding rather than a problem that must be solved before you can proceed with your life. It invites ongoing exploration rather than demanding final answers. This spirit of inquiry might be one of the most valuable gifts that philosophical reflection can offer. Instead of providing dogmatic certainty, it cultivates what the Zen tradition calls don't know mind, a state of open curiosity that remains receptive to new information and fresh perspectives. This don't know mind doesn't indicate ignorance, but rather a sophisticated understanding that reality is far more complex and mysterious than any single conceptual framework can capture. From this perspective, the question, do you actually have free will, becomes an invitation to pay closer attention to the subtle dynamics of your own consciousness, to notice the interplay between intention and action, between conscious deliberation and unconscious processing, between personal effort and impersonal forces. It becomes a practice rather than a problem, a way of deepening your appreciation for the mystery of being a conscious creature in an interconnected universe. As you drift closer to the threshold of sleep, where conscious control naturally gives way to the deeper intelligence of dreams, you carry this question with you into realms where the usual boundaries between self and world, between choice and destiny, dissolve into something more fluid and mysterious. In dreams, you'll make decisions that feel completely real while following narratives that emerge from processes entirely beyond your waking comprehension. Perhaps the dream state offers its own teaching about the nature of agency, revealing how consciousness can be both active and receptive, both creative and responsive, both individual and universal. In dreams, you're simultaneously the author, the audience, and the characters, in stories that unfold with their own logic and purpose. You choose and are chosen, direct and are directed, create and discover in ways that transcend the usual categories of free will and determinism. The boundary between dreaming and waking consciousness might be less absolute than we typically assume. Throughout your waking life, you're constantly navigating the intersection between conscious intention and unconscious processing, between personal agency and impersonal forces, between the stories you tell yourself about your choices and the deeper currents that actually shape your experience. The question of free will thus becomes not just a philosophical puzzle, but an invitation to live more consciously, to participate more skillfully in whatever processes are unfolding through your awareness, to embrace both your capacity for choice and the mystery of what lies beyond choice. Whether you choose your path or discover it, whether you author your story or read it, you remain a unique and precious expression of consciousness exploring itself through the particular circumstances of your individual existence. And in this exploration, in this ongoing dance between freedom and conditioning, between choice and destiny, between individual will and universal intelligence, you participate in the ancient mystery of what it means to be aware, to be alive, to be human in a cosmos vast beyond imagination, yet intimate enough to know itself through your particular eyes, your particular choices, your particular journey into whatever dreams may come. The question deepens as we consider the role that attention itself plays in this dance of agency and determination. Right now, as these words flow through your awareness, you have some capacity to direct where your attention goes. You could focus on the sound of the words, the meaning they convey, the physical sensations in your body, or the space between thoughts. This ability to direct attention, however limited and conditioned it might be, represents perhaps the most fundamental form of choice available to conscious beings. Yet even this capacity reveals its own mysteries. When you try to focus your attention on something specific, like your breath or a particular sound, you quickly discover that your mind has its own agenda. Thoughts arise uninvited, memories surface without permission, and your attention drifts despite your best intentions. The very effort to control your attention often creates tension that makes concentration more difficult, not easier. This paradox points to something profound about the nature of mental freedom. The more forcefully you try to control your inner experience, the more you may find yourself struggling against the natural movements of consciousness. But when you learn to guide attention gently, like encouraging a curious child rather than commanding a reluctant servant, something different becomes possible. Attention begins to settle naturally, not through force but through patient invitation. This gentle approach to working with your own mind might offer insights into how all human agency operates. Perhaps the most skillful choices arise not from overpowering other possibilities, but from creating conditions where wise action emerges naturally. Like a skilled gardener who doesn't force plants to grow, but creates the optimal conditions for their flourishing, you might learn to cultivate inner states that naturally give rise to beneficial choices. Consider how this applies to the development of positive qualities like patience, kindness, or courage. You cannot simply decide to be patient and instantly possess unshakable equanimity. But you can notice the conditions under which patience tends to arise naturally in your experience. Perhaps it emerges more easily when you're well rested, when you remember your deeper values, when you take time to understand others' perspectives, or when you cultivate a sense of spaciousness rather than urgency. By paying attention to these patterns, you can begin to influence your experience indirectly, creating conditions that support the qualities you wish to develop. This approach honors both the reality of conditioning and the possibility of conscious participation in that conditioning. You're not fighting against your nature, but learning to work with it more skillfully. The same principle applies to unwinding patterns that cause suffering. When you find yourself caught in cycles of worry, anger, or compulsive behavior, forceful resistance often strengthens these patterns rather than dissolving them. The worried mind that tries to stop worrying often becomes more worried. The angry person who demands that they stop feeling angry often becomes angry at their anger, creating a second layer of reactivity. But when you learn to observe these patterns with patient awareness, without immediately trying to fix or change them, something remarkable can happen. The patterns begin to lose their compulsive quality simply through being seen clearly. Like a knot that loosens when you stop pulling at it frantically and instead examine how it's constructed, psychological patterns often dissolve naturally when met with the right quality of attention. This dissolution isn't something you do through willpower exactly. It's more like something that happens when the conditions are right, when awareness is steady and accepting, when you're present enough to see clearly without being caught up in reactive responses. The change occurs, but it occurs through you rather than by you, in partnership with intelligence that operates beyond the reach of ordinary thinking. The contemplative traditions have mapped these processes with remarkable precision, developing sophisticated understandings of how consciousness can be trained and refined. They speak of stages of development where the capacity for choice gradually expands, where reactive patterns naturally diminish, where wisdom and compassion begin to flow more freely. These aren't necessarily states of ultimate metaphysical freedom, but they represent genuine liberation from many of the internal constraints that normally limit human flourishing. What's particularly interesting is that this liberation often comes not through gaining more control, but through needing less control. As awareness becomes more stable and clear, as emotional reactivity decreases, as understanding deepens, life begins to flow more harmoniously without requiring constant management from the executive mind. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. Initially, you need intense concentration and effort, but eventually the riding happens naturally, with minimal conscious oversight. This natural functioning doesn't eliminate choice but transforms its quality. Instead of choices emerging from struggle and conflict between competing desires, they begin to arise from a deeper clarity about what serves the larger good. Instead of decisions being driven by fear, craving, or unconscious conditioning, they emerge from wisdom that sees the bigger picture and responds appropriately to each situation. Consider how this might look in practical terms. When someone treats you rudely, instead of automatically reacting with defensiveness or counterattack, you might find yourself naturally responding with curiosity about what pain or confusion might be driving their behavior. This isn't a forced response based on moral principles you've memorized, but a spontaneous expression of understanding that emerges when you're not caught up in protecting your ego. When facing a difficult decision, instead of becoming paralyzed by over-analysis or making impulsive choices to escape uncertainty, you might find yourself naturally gathering relevant information, consulting your deeper values, and then allowing a decision to emerge from this process of careful consideration. The choice feels both fully yours and somehow, beyond your personal preferences, aligned with a wisdom that transcends narrow self-interest. These examples point to a kind of agency that operates differently from our usual conception of willpower. It's not about the ego mind overpowering other forces, but about consciousness functioning more harmoniously, with less internal conflict and greater alignment between different levels of understanding. The choices that emerge from this harmony often surprise the thinking mind, revealing possibilities that weren't apparent when you were trying to figure everything out through analysis alone. This harmonious functioning might represent the highest form of freedom available to human beings. Not the freedom to do anything you want regardless of consequences, but the freedom to respond appropriately to each situation, guided by wisdom rather than driven by compulsion. Not the freedom from all conditioning, but the freedom to participate consciously in beneficial conditioning while gradually releasing patterns that cause suffering. The development of this kind of freedom is perhaps the most practical application of philosophical inquiry into agency and choice. Whether or not you have free will in some ultimate metaphysical sense becomes less important than the question of how to cultivate greater harmony between your conscious intentions and your actual behavior, between your deepest values and your moment-to-moment responses to life's challenges. As you lie there now, perhaps feeling your body settling even more deeply into rest, you might notice how this natural relaxation demonstrates the principle we've been exploring. You're not forcing your muscles to release tension or commanding your nervous system to shift into rest mode. Instead, you've created conditions that allow these natural processes to unfold, lying down comfortably, letting go of the day's concerns, allowing your mind to settle into quieter rhythms. The relaxation that's occurring is both your doing and not your doing. You made choices that support it, but the actual physiological changes happen through intelligence that operates beyond conscious control. Your participation matters, but it's a gentle participation, more like cooperation than domination, more like partnership than control. This same quality of gentle participation can inform all your choices and actions. You can learn to act decisively while holding outcomes lightly, to work diligently while trusting processes beyond your direct influence, to take responsibility while remaining humble about the limits of your understanding and control. This balanced approach avoids both the stress of trying to control everything and the passivity of believing you have no influence at all. The balance is dynamic rather than static, requiring constant adjustment as circumstances change. Sometimes situations call for more active intervention, sometimes for patient allowing. Sometimes you need to speak up clearly, sometimes to listen deeply. Sometimes you need to push forward with determination, sometimes to yield and adapt to forces larger than yourself. Learning to read these situations skillfully is perhaps more important than resolving abstract questions about the ultimate nature of choice. This practical wisdom develops through experience rather than through purely intellectual understanding. Each situation you encounter, each choice you make, each consequence you experience, provides information about how consciousness and action interact in the specific circumstances of your life. Over time, this accumulated experience becomes a kind of embodied knowledge that can guide future choices more reliably than abstract principles alone. The process is like learning to navigate by reading the subtle signs of wind and weather rather than by following rigid rules. An experienced sailor learns to feel the shift in air pressure that signals an approaching storm, to notice the colour of the water that indicates dangerous shallows, to sense the boat's response to different adjustments of the sail. This knowledge can't be fully captured in manuals or formulas, but emerges from years of attentive practice. Similarly, the art of living skillfully involves learning to read the subtle signs of your own consciousness, noticing what conditions support clarity and what conditions create confusion, recognizing when you're operating from wisdom and when you're caught in reactive patterns, sensing when to act and when to wait for greater understanding to emerge. This sensitivity to the movements of your own awareness might be the most valuable skill you can develop, regardless of how the free will debate ultimately resolves. Whether your choices are free or determined, whether consciousness is fundamental or emergent, you still have the immediate experience of navigating life moment by moment, response by response, decision by decision. The quality of attention you bring to this navigation makes an enormous difference in the outcomes, even if the attention itself arises from causes beyond your ultimate control. When you're present and aware, you tend to make choices that serve your long-term well-being and the well-being of others. When you're distracted or reactive, you're more likely to act in ways that create problems for yourself and those around you. This relationship between awareness and wise action has been recognized across cultures and throughout history. The ancient Greeks spoke of knowing yourself as the foundation of all wisdom. Buddhist psychology describes mindfulness as the key factor that enables all other beneficial mental qualities to develop. Modern psychology has validated these insights, showing that self-awareness correlates with better decision-making, stronger relationships, and greater life satisfaction. What's remarkable is that this capacity for awareness can be cultivated regardless of your starting point. Whether you're naturally introspective or tend to focus outwardly, whether you're emotionally sensitive or more analytical, Whether you're optimistic or skeptical, you can learn to pay closer attention to the movements of your own consciousness and use that attention to guide your choices more skillfully. The cultivation happens through simple practices repeated consistently over time, pausing before responding when emotions are intense, taking a few conscious breaths before making important decisions, noticing the difference between reactions driven by fear or desire and responses that emerge from deeper wisdom. Observing how different choices affect your sense of inner harmony and outer relationships. These practices don't require you to become a different kind of person or to achieve some extraordinary state of consciousness. They simply involve using the awareness you already possess more deliberately and systematically. Like physical fitness, mental fitness develops gradually through regular exercise, with small improvements accumulating into significant changes over time. The changes often surprise people by their subtlety and naturalness. Instead of dramatic personality transformation, there's usually a gentle shift toward greater emotional balance, clearer thinking, and more spontaneous compassion. Instead of rigid self-control, there's a natural alignment between values and actions that feels effortless rather than forced. These developments might represent the practical fruits of whatever freedom human beings actually possess. Whether that freedom is metaphysically ultimate or emerges from complex natural processes seems less important than the lived reality of becoming more conscious, more responsive, more capable of choices that serve life rather than diminish it. As your thoughts continue to soften and drift, as the boundaries between reflection and rest become increasingly permeable, you might sense how this entire inquiry into free will has been an exploration of what it means to be conscious, to be aware, to participate knowingly in the great mystery of existence. The question has led us not to final answers, but to deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of human experience. Whether you have free will or not, you remain a remarkable phenomenon. Matter, organized in such a way that it can contemplate its own nature, atoms arranged into patterns capable of love and curiosity and wonder. Whether your choices are ultimately free or determined, they emerge from the unique constellation of experiences, relationships, and possibilities that constitute your particular journey through consciousness. The question continues to invite exploration rather than demanding resolution. Each moment of awareness, each pause between stimulus and response, each choice made with care rather than compulsion, represents a living answer to the puzzle of human agency. Not a theoretical answer that satisfies the analytical mind, but an embodied response that honors both the mystery of consciousness and the practical necessity of living with wisdom and care. Tomorrow you'll wake to face new choices, new opportunities to exercise whatever freedom you possess, in service of whatever you hold most dear. The philosophical questions will remain beautifully unresolved, but your capacity to participate consciously in your own unfolding can continue to deepen, moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. And perhaps this is enough, not to solve the mystery of free will once and for all, but to live it fully, to embrace both your agency and your limitations, to act with both determination and humility, to choose with both wisdom and acceptance of the unknown. In this living of the question, you might find a freedom that transcends the need for metaphysical certainty, a peace that comes from participating wholeheartedly in the great dance of existence, whatever its ultimate nature might be. The gentle rhythm of your breathing carries you deeper into rest now, into the realm where questions dissolve into the wordless wisdom of sleep, where consciousness continues its mysterious work of integration and renewal, where tomorrow's choices are quietly preparing themselves to emerge from whatever dreams may come. The question of free will drifts with you into this deeper knowing, not as a problem requiring solution, but as a doorway into ever greater appreciation for the miracle of being aware, being alive, being human in a universe vast beyond comprehension, yet intimate enough to know itself through your particular experience of choosing, moment by precious moment, how to live. The question of free will has walked with us through millennia of human thought, yet it remains as fresh and pressing as the choice you made to listen tonight. As your breathing settles into the deeper rhythms that herald sleep's approach, consider how this ancient puzzle has shaped not just philosophy, but the very foundations of how we organize society, understand ourselves, and relate to one another. In courtrooms around the world, judges and juries grapple daily with questions that echo our philosophical inquiry. When someone commits a crime, we ask not just what they did, but whether they could have done otherwise. The entire edifice of justice rests on assumptions about human agency that philosophers have debated for centuries without reaching consensus. A person who acts under severe mental illness is treated differently than one who plans their actions carefully, yet both might argue that their choices emerged from factors beyond their ultimate control. The tension becomes even more pronounced when we consider how neuroscience continues to reveal the unconscious roots of behavior. Brain imaging studies show that patterns of neural activity can predict some decisions several seconds before people report being aware of choosing. Marketing researchers use this knowledge to influence consumer behavior in ways that operate below conscious awareness. Political campaigns employ sophisticated psychological techniques to shape voting patterns through appeals that bypass rational deliberation. These developments raise uncomfortable questions about the extent to which any of our choices emerge from genuine deliberation versus sophisticated manipulation of unconscious processes. If your political preferences can be influenced by subtle changes in how information is presented, if your purchasing decisions can be guided by carefully designed environmental cues, if your moral judgments can be altered by factors as arbitrary as whether you're hungry or well-fed, then what remains of the autonomous self that Western philosophy has long celebrated? Yet perhaps these discoveries, rather than undermining human agency, simply reveal its true nature as something more collaborative and contextual than we previously imagined. Your choices might not emerge from some isolated command center in your brain, but from the dynamic interaction between your conscious awareness, your unconscious processing, your emotional responses, your bodily state, and the social environment in which you're embedded. This more distributed understanding of agency might actually be liberating rather than constraining. If you recognize that your choices emerge from this complex web of influences, you can begin to work more skillfully with all the factors that shape your decisions. Instead of trying to control outcomes through willpower alone, you can learn to create conditions that naturally support the kinds of choices you want to make. Consider how this might apply to something as simple as maintaining healthy habits. The traditional approach often relies on discipline and self-control, trying to force yourself to exercise regularly or eat nutritious foods through sheer determination. But this approach frequently fails because it ignores the complex factors that actually drive behavior. You might have the best intentions to exercise every morning, but if you stay up late watching television, if your workout clothes are buried in the closet, if you haven't found forms of movement that you actually enjoy, then your good intentions are fighting against powerful environmental and psychological currents. As your mind drifts into the gentle embrace of sleep, carry with you this beautiful uncertainty about the nature of your own choices. Whether you possess ultimate freedom or participate in an elegant dance of causation, you remain a conscious being capable of wisdom, compassion, and wonder. The question itself has been a gift, inviting deeper awareness of the mysterious interplay between intention and action. Rest now in the knowledge that tomorrow's choices, free or determined, will emerge from the unique constellation of awareness that is unmistakably you.